Greetings my peeps, I'm John the Verbose, and this video is about Druid robes. So, this is my current Druid robe. Whoop. With a hood. And so we're going to make some more like it. This is actually the second robe that I've made for myself. And so we're actually going to make some more robes, and we're going to base it off of my first one, which I'll show you in a second. But basically, what you need first is some linen, and I managed to find a heck of a lot of linen. So, yeah. It's actually, well, this here is only 5 yards, I think. But it's from an upholstery bolt, so it's wider. Normally when I make Druid robes, I buy unbleached white linen, 5 yards, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, fold it this way, and so the top part, which you see holding me here, which you see me holding here, drapes over my shoulders, and I cut a head hole there, and then of course I would have to add extensions to the sleeves. But I thought with this one, since it's upholstery sized, that it'd be easier if I turned it sideways, because if I hold it up to my shoulders now, it goes all the way down to my ankles. Got this holding it the long way. I can make the sleeves as long as I want them to be. And so I will just double this over as wide as my arm span, or wider if you want like really loose billowy sleeves. And so then I would sew it together across the top except for where I want the head to be, and then I have this perfect billowy spacious Druid robe. So that's what we're going to do with this one. So here, Crucified is my first robe, and so this is actually the one that we're going to base the pattern off of for the ones that I'm going to be making. With the exception of this one is the kind that it's folded over the shoulder, and then I had cut out the hole for the head to go through. But just, I mean, we're going to sew it up in a T anyway, and so basically it's going to be just stitched across the top of the sleeve, and then of course we're going to do, before we do any cutting, we're going to stitch the bottom end of the sleeve and then stitch all the way down the sides. And then once that's all secured, nice and neat, that is when we cut away the fabric that we're not going to use. And actually we are going to use that, because the fabric that we cut away is going into the hood. And so the hood is attached separately, and that one, it's just kind of modeled after a hoodie hood, but it's made much larger, and it's rounded because pointed hoods on a white robe really look kind of bad in the 20th and 21st centuries. So yeah, attaching the hood is kind of difficult to do symmetrically. Like you'll see on this one, it's right there in the middle, and then it's like 2 inches off on the right. And I believe when I attached it, I started from the center of the back and worked my way around once, and then went back as a reinforcing stitch, came around the other side, and it's just the way the fabric naturally stretches when you pull and stitch it, that it didn't work out. And so, but that's fine, it gives it a little bit more of that organic or human touch. And here we have my ancestral altar. And this is my working altar. This is my grandmother's 1954 Singer 66 model. And so this one has made clothing for 5 generations of my family. So this has a very deep, well, it's about as deep as an ancestral connection as I can have in an heirloom. And this thing still works beautifully. It only sews in a straight line, and I'm okay with that because it is a powerful machine. everything inside the workings is steel, and so you just got to keep it oiled every couple of months. And I did some maintenance to it to make sure it was working well. So yeah, this is the machine that we'll be using to make some druid robes on for some of my fellow druids, and so this is going to be an exciting project. You may have some questions about the process, and these may be some questions that I have already had myself. And so when I was making my druid robes, a lot of times I would just wing it and hope for the best. But I can share my pattern here in the video, and so anyone can use my pattern. They can do the cloth sideways or lengthwise or folding it. Like if you wanted to make your own ritual robe, it doesn't have to be out of linen. It doesn't have to be out of like unbleached white fabric or anything. Like if you can sew it, then you can make it. Okay, so here we have my basic pattern, and so basically what I did was I folded it in half. Like the cloth is actually folded along that edge over there. So this was all open, this was open, and this side was open, and so I just ran it through the sewing machine across the top. And so we're going to cut a section open for the neck hole, and we'll see that up ahead. But for the measurements and everything, it's supposed to be billowy. And so from that end to this end is 74 inches. And then the sleeve from here to the stitch up here is 13 inches. So the circumference is going to be 26 inches all around. And when you sew it down, I like to roll over the inside seam and sew it down again so it doesn't fray. And so you do lose a little bit on each seam that you have. So I kind of used an old shirt as a basis to make sure that my arms would fit in here with plenty of room. And so yeah, there's one of my old shirt sleeves. And then basically to make it symmetrical here, it's hard to see, but there's a little blue mark from a grease pencil, and that is where I mark to the center. This is like the center of the neck right there. And so from there I measured out, well, it's like this will be the corner of the underarm, and then of course the other one over here. And so this rectangular area is going to be cut away, and that's going to be cut away. And so we're stitching along the blue grease pencil markings from about there to there. It's consistent. So this is all 64 inches in circumference, 64 inches at the waist. And then from here it tapers out an additional 2 inches so that the low end is 36 inches from here to here for a circumference of 70, it's not 72 inches. Oh, the circumference is 72 inches, yes. And that's just to make it easier for going up or down stairs, squatting, things that would otherwise put stress on the seams, so it's a little bit wider down here. Usually this end is the end that gets folded, and and because of that, the cloth is narrower this way, and so I have to actually use the second section of the square to make sleeve extensions. Otherwise you get a short sleeve robe. There's my first robe. It's inside out, and so right there, that roll, this is the main body of the robe. This is where I folded it across the top. Here's the hood. Here's the end of the sleeve, and this seam here was the edge of the cloth, and so that's when this part of the sleeve here came from the spare section. And so it's always an annoying step when you go that way, because usually with the size of the bolt of fabric, that's what you have to do. So this one from top to bottom is 50 inches. So it is designed for a person of medium to shorter height. And that it all comes down to the size of the bolt of cloth that you get. Some of the really cheaper ones you got to watch out for, because they're only 1 yard across. And the larger ones, which are more expensive, of course, are usually 4 feet across. And so this one is 50 inches, which is just over 4 feet. So now the next step is, before we cut anything, we're going to sew along the blue lines. And this one I just kind of went over. The grease pencil will wash out eventually. And then a lot of times it says dry clean only. You know, I've got 2 robes. I've had this one for years, and I've never dry cleaned it. I've washed it, like whenever I'm out in smoke from bonfires, I'll come home and I'll wash it to get the smoke out, to make sure there are no wood ticks in it, because I crawl through the woods, and this, it's a little discolored because I once accidentally washed it with something red, and so after that I couldn't get the pink out. And so I soaked this thing in a bucket full of tea. Okay, so now that we have sewn the robe, it is now somewhat wearable. Right now, here's the edge that is folded. This whole edge is just folded over. This is the end of the sleeve, so we do need to cut this open. This is stitched right now along the blue line. And so basically, I started at the bottom of the bottom of the robe, and then worked my way up to the corner. And here at the underarm, this part is reinforced, because there's going to be a lot of stress at this point, especially if you happen to make a tighter robe. And so then I got down to about 1/4 inch, like right to there, stopped, turned back, and pretty much did the same thing. So this is already reinforced, and so and plus now it's ready to be cut. If you're using sewing needles, please consult a doctor before using sharp objects, because you could really hurt yourself even with a small needle. I hate pointy things, and I hate sharp things because they're just intimidating. So this is a little Fisker's cloth cutter that acts like a pizza pizza cutter. And you'll want to invest in one of these things. Be careful what is underneath whatever it is that you're cutting. Right now I'm using old bookshelves that for a shelf I don't have. And so the wood has a lot of little tiny cuts and scratches and scrapes in it. And I'm doing that because I am fine with that. And so you'll definitely want to invest in these, because this is awesome. And this is the largest cutting surface I have, because the one I want to get is like $120. So, but since I've already got this on the boards, I don't really need to use the self-healing mats. You know, everything I do is arbitrary. And because this is even when I realized that my line's not perfectly straight, and that's fine. So I'm going to give it, like, was it 3/4 of an inch? I'm guessing. I got a ruler in my left hand, and I'm not even going to measure it. But basically, and I'm going to cut away from myself. As a former scout, it's always important to cut away from yourself. So, and I used a lot of pressure, but it doesn't need a lot of pressure to do that cut. And it's beautiful. It's so much easier than scissors. So we just cut off the fold right there, and now the sleeve is actually open, and you can technically wear it now. So always when you're done using this, put put the shield back up so you don't end up cutting yourself or everything else. Now this is my cotton summer tabard. It's really lightweight, and so when I made it, I just took a saucer from a kitchen cabinet, like a small dish, and drew a circle on this fabric of cloth and cut around the small dish. And so this is like 1 hand span for me. Hand span 9 inches. Okay, so it's roughly 9 inches, but it's not symmetrical because I am a noob. And so basically I folded this fabric twice over itself to keep it from fraying, and of all the times it's been through the wash, it has never started fraying. So, and there's where I sewed the knot at the end of the stitching. So in the end, it's the size of like a 9-inch plate. But I don't really like the round style. That's just a me thing. What you need to do is don't use your own shirt. Use somebody else, somebody that you have a lot of trust in, and cut a hole in one of their shirts. And so this one is rather football shaped, and it's very arbitrary. This doesn't really stretch, but my head seems to fit through it without pushing on anything. So another trick to do is like take a soft tape measure and wrap it around your nose, like from the tip of your nose to around your ears to the part of your head, the back of your head that sticks out the most. All right, we have a robe. So here, like I said, from where I stitched it together, actually the very top of the fabric, the frilly stuff that's sticking up all the way down to the bottom edge, that's 50 inches, 50. I am 5'6.5" to here. So for me, this is perfect. If you can find a bolt of linen that is 50 inches from edge to edge, then you just want to get as many meters as you are from fingertip to fingertip. And so this is cool. Thing is, the sleeves are going to get shorter because I'm going to roll the edges. I am wearing it inside out, fingertip to fingertip. I think I kind of unscientifically measured as 74 inches. It's very comfortable. I can climb stairs without the fabric pulling at the back of my other calf. So, and then the head hole feels perfect. So, I don't know, use a banana as an arbitrary measurement, maybe a small football, start with that. And then if you're taller than I am, if you're a foot taller, then basically this is gonna be up to your knees. So like if you're 6.5 feet tall, but yeah, basically do what you think is comfortable. My first Druid robe pretty much just went past my knees, and it felt like a skirt. And so it's supposed to feel more like a billowy nightgown. So everything I do is kind of an experiment. I've never really done the same thing twice. And so don't ask me a whole lot of questions on how do I do this, how do I do that, because I just wing it. So that's my advice to you, is look up other existing examples online and wing it. Okay, so here we're going to make the hood. So you want to measure out the size of the neck hole that you have here. So this one is roughly 14.25 inches from this point to this point. And so of course you'll want to double that to make a measurement. Well, I do. I want to do that because that's my preference. This is what I wanted to do with my robe. So 14.25, and I'm horrible at arithmetic. So that's like 26 inches, isn't it? No, it's not. It's 28. And okay, this bag is here just for contrast so you can see what I'm doing. Because if I go like this, I don't know, you can still kind of see it, but some people might not be able to. So, and linen is not supposed to stretch, but when you're sewing it, it will kind of pull and stretch. It's not an elastic stretch, but it's just enough that when the machine is pulling on it, if you don't pin it together, and I hate pins, so this is what happens to me, is that the cloth will kind of, the way it lines up will slowly drift, and even if I do pin it, it starts to like roll over itself, and I was like, so why did I pin it at all? I hate pins. So this is the rectangle of cloth that I have left over, and I actually am going to see, I only need one of these, not two, and we are going to fold this over. Okay, so it's going to be smaller than my old hood. So yeah, so we're just going to go with the size of the cloth that we have, and in an unscientific way, we're going to wing it. And I do want to know how much I want from front to back. I want to leave a few inches here because we're going to roll this in to protect the hems. 1 inch and an inch again to match up with this one. And in case anyone's really curious about this, because the stitch shows off a lot of texture, it's got a little bit of puckering going on, but I'm using mixed fibers in this, so this is blasphemy, this druid robe for pagan purposes. We have, of course, linen cloth, and this thread here is like a heavy gauge cotton string, and I probably got it in the, well, I was in Ireland, and I found it at a convenience store. So I'm guessing this was for, like, if you're cooking turkey in the oven and you need to tie the legs together. I've never cooked a turkey myself before, so, but I think this is that type of cotton string. And so part of my robe is from Ireland. Yay. I'm going to try not to destroy my current hood. Right there, because you can see where it's got this little crescent going on here. And I'm not sure what the story is with that, but that can go F itself somewhere else. Okay, so again, the hood is inside out, and the next step is to sew this shut up here. And this is the neck, and then this will be the opening. So the next step that we have is to fold this back and then just reinforce this on the sewing machine to kind of make the opening. And keep in mind that this is going to be inside out. So that's more than an inch, actually. And in some places it is an inch. So I'm just going to roll it over on itself and let it be its own gauge. Close enough. So this is where the top of the head is going to be inside. And we're just going to go down. That was a bit close for comfort. That is too. Try that. Okay, so now we're going to rethread this. Here's our first stop. Here's the tiny little hook. Then around the spool tensioner. And then there's a little metal wire right there, it's flexing. Then under this thingamabob, and through that little thing, and then there's this little tiny hook right here. And we're not done yet, because there's this hard wire right here. Just gonna go around that. And then I'm actually gonna do this looking through the camera and not at the thread. Oh, I did it. Alright, so that's through the eye of the needle. And raise the pressure foot. I like a little bit more slack than that. Easier for me to tie. Bobbin! At least I know the proper term for this doodad. The bobbin. Thread goes under there and over the top in that little depression, then you slide the trapdoor shut. This is where I hold on to my spool thread and manually turn the, I don't know what you call the handle on this thing. Oh, I now feel loose, and before the needle goes back down, I just start pulling on the spool thread, and up through the hole comes the bobbin thread. Oh, this is mechanical alchemy at its finest. My thread feels a bit tight, but our tensioner is at 6, which since I did a little bit of moderate maintenance to the machine, I realized that I need to be using a tighter setting than 2. Here's the neck opening, and you can see the frayed edge. So we're going to determine which side faces the front now. It really doesn't matter because I cut the whole thing on both sides, so we're just kind of folding it where it's cut, right here. And right where my thumb is, we're going to draw a line with my little grease pencil, and that is the back of the neck. So right there, it's really faint and really hard to see. So that is where the crease in the back of the hood is going to be sewn on. Yeah, so the whole thing's inside out. You have your hood, you're going to open it up a little bit. And so here is the little hem, crease, seam, sail, I don't know the difference between hems and seams. It's a line with a thread in it that's holding fabric together. So we're going to line up that seam with the fabric facing sail outward like that, and then we're just going to start sewing it down. We're going to go one direction around the right side of the neck, then we're going to come back and reinforce that across where we just came, and then go back across the left side of the neck, and then come back and reinforce that. And then where we started our thread, we want to end as close as possible to that, and we can tie it all together. In the end, it's going to be hunky-dory. There's the hood. There's the neck of the robe. And so now I'm triple checking to make sure that I'm lined up with that little blue line. You can see it's on that thick thread. So we're going to center that right over that. And line up the edges very carefully. Press your foot down. All systems go. Keep going. Onward! Stop! Because fingers and sewing needles don't mix. Well, they do, and when they do, that's a bad thing. So don't mix fingers and sewing needles. This machine is more powerful than my flesh. This machine is actually more powerful than your average contemporary singer, because most of those parts are made out of like plastic and aluminum cogs, if they aren't plastic cogs. Alright, so here we have the robe. I turned it outside in, and here's the hood. This is as close as I got to the front of the hoods to meet. And in relation to the back center, here's where the back of the hood is sewn up, and then this is the neck line, and there is my middle stripe. So if we kind of just pull on this way, we can find out how close to the middle we were. My blue line centered. Okay, so the center of the robe is pretty much just, from your perspective, to the left of actually, I have this all inside out. It's okay. So center is it's so close. It's like right there in that corner. And then to be honest, it took 3 attempts to attach the hood the right way. The first time I did it, I realized it was entirely inside out in relation. Well, the robe was inside out. The hood was partially right side in. And so I ripped out all the threads. Like, here's some evidence I need to hide. So I had to use my hem ripper and take care of removing the entire hood after it was already completely on. And I was happy, and I checked it, and I was like, oh, that's not right. And so I double checked my math and went over things again, and well, reattached it. And I finally made sure that the inside center stitch of the hood was where it needed to be. And so I was like, oh good. And then I looked at the neck, and the neck was on the outside, and I was like, oh no. So it was like an hour wasted of picking out the threads, and I'm still finding these loose threads that I ripped out. Like, here's one. And so that's when I stopped everything. I got the big picture, and I figured out, okay, let's just put it outside in, so like the way it's supposed to be, and line everything up the way it's supposed to look as if it was done, and then carefully turn everything inside out together. And I felt like I was still gonna screw something up, but I was like, nope. Third time's the charm. It's gonna be right, and if it's wrong, I'm gonna cry and go to bed. So I pulled it inside out, or actually it's outside in now, and it looks like I did it right. So, yay! So don't ask me how I do it, because I wing it. This is actually probably the most comfortable hood I've ever attached to a robe. And the next step that we would want to do is basically turn it back inside out, and then roll the hems over themselves, and then sew them down. That's the hems inside the sleeve here, along the bottom of the sleeve here, along both the sides, around the neck, and of course the inside of the hood. So once all the hems are rolled over and reinforced, that will stop all this fraying from happening. And then after that, that is when we would roll this in 2 inches. So it will no longer go to my last knuckles. It will probably go to the top of the back of my hand, to there, which is really good because it lets me grab things without the fabric getting in the way like this is now. If you wanted to be a posh druid, instead of, like, if you wanted to retain the full length of your sleeves, like if they're maybe shorter than you expected, these aren't quite the same length, but that's fine, they're close enough. If you didn't want to roll these over to protect the edges from fraying, you could go the expensive route and get like an $8 spool of ribbon of your color of choosing. Like, this is a silver, and let's see, what is this, a 2-inch ribbon or 1.5? This is 1.5 inch across, and I just dropped the spool. And you could wrap it around the edges so that it would be 3/4 of an inch on either side, and of course if you get like a 2-inch spool, you could make it 1 inch on either side, and it'll look nice if you can get it to be folded evenly. This can be ironed if you're very quick and careful about it. Use a low heat just to give it a crease, and then put it on top, and then sew it in situ. It'll stiffen it up somewhat significantly. And even though this is just a reinforcement stitch, we're still going to increase the distance between threads And so yeah, with the Singer, I don't know if this refers to like, I don't know what the numbers mean, but this is a really short, I think it's like 30 stitches per inch, and maybe this is 7. I've never actually measured it to find out, but we're gonna make a longer stitch. Make it all the way long, but I want it to have some strength behind it in the reinforcing, so we're gonna go with 7. And wherever these little fraying threads poke through, I just like to tuck them under with like the rounded edge of my scissors, and that seems to work out for me. And then go for it. Alright, so now that you have all of your exposed seams rolled over and protected, like here we're looking at the sleeve, what we want to do, the last steps, is basically, well, it's still inside out, roll up the sleeves, maybe like a 1/2 inch, and then roll it over again, another 1/2 inch, and sew that down. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom of the robe opening, where the legs go through. And so this is where it can be tailored to suit your preferences, or your arm length to like your wrists if you don't want the sleeve getting in the way. I'm gonna try to keep this as long as I can this time, so I can tuck one sleeve into the other. You could iron it down if you want to. I think I'm just gonna hold it and roll it over twice, and then you'll probably want to stitch twice to keep it flat if you don't want it to end up looking rolled like this around the edge of the cuff. So it all comes down to your personal preference. Alright, so it's hard to tell, but this is the finished piece. I have stitched the ends down over double, and so it no longer goes past my fingertips, but it rests, like if I stretch out my arms and they're just out, they rest across my last knuckles. It is still long enough that I can grab the fabric here and tuck it into my other sleeve, one or the other. It's a little bit tricky to do deeply, and it kind of opens up at the bottom here, but still gets the job done, and I don't really need to do that anyway. It's just a shtick. So, the hood is comfy. It is reinforced. The hem in the back is reinforced. So here is the extent of the hood. As I bump my microphone. So, and then the bottom hems are also stitched shut and protected, and the hood doesn't feel like it would catch wind too much. And one thing I like to do is keep my head buzzed, which kind of makes a Velcro for a type of Velcro, and it catches the fabric and keeps it in place. I call it my druidic tonsure, just a buzz cut. And then I typically do use a belt, and there you can use like what do they call it? The satin cord that has kind of a metallic sheen to it. You can use like a braided belt. You can use a leather belt, though the stain might transfer into the fabric permanently. Also, one thing that I tend to do most often is, well, my typical belt, which is starting to get old and the seams are not holding, is 2 long women's scarves, and it's kind of like a muslin material, and I folded the scarf on itself at least 4 times, so it's like 4 layers of muslin fabric. It's really light, and there are 2 scarves that are actually sewn together, and I use a cincture belt out of that. So you basically make a slip knot for it, and you can tie that cincture to the hip or to the pelvis or like whatever. There's really no wrong way with the belt, and some of my Grove mates prefer to go without a belt and just wear the robe as is. I think it tends to look like a nightgown when they do that, but that's fine. So, end result is good. It's good.